Can you talk a little bit about what it's like now that you're launched? So we have a few people here who aren't launched. I think it's really helpful to just have your experience of like, okay, I wasn't launched. When you and I met, you had an online radio station, but you did not have a
Yeah.
podcast. Now you're at the other side of the threshold where you're like changing content strategy and like guest strategy. And so you're in a different realm. Maybe you could just share a little bit about what that journey is like just so everyone can benefit from that.
Thank you. Well, launching just changes the whole game. It like you go from JV to varsity, basically. You know, you're from the practice squad, now you're on the real team. So it just changes everything for you in a good way, though. All of it is in a good way. It's so exciting. So I have 5 episodes out right now. I'll probably have 7 by the end of the week. And it just makes you feel like you're really contributing to the world. You're doing something real, you know, now that you've launched. Up until then, you're just kind of like, you're just doing whatever and nobody really knows anything about what you're doing. It's cool for yourself, but now you entered into this world, and whether it's small or not, it doesn't matter, because if you listen to some of the big ones, just listen to when they first started. They thought they were horrible and they wanted to quit. And the only reason they did it because somebody was like, yo, man, just do a couple more. And so launching is, like I said, it just puts you in the big leagues, and it makes you now want to stay really creative because now you're in it. So it's like, now I keep looking back at my first one and I'm like, oh man, this is what I would have done a little bit differently. Maybe I'll change the intro. But you know, you just let it be as it is. It's okay. It's great to see the progression. And so every single one now, I feel like I'm just trying to improve between every single interview, even if it's just a little bit, you know what I mean? And I did something with this guy I just interviewed the other day. He's a journalist and has interviewed pretty much every single living jazz musician. So he does this for a living. And I did something where it was cliche, right? But I normally do it. And he laughed. You know, he didn't criticize me for it, but he laughed. He's like, oh yeah, I know what that means. You know, because I said something at the end. I'm like, well, you know, I just have a couple more questions and he just laughed because he's like, yeah, I know exactly what that means. Like I do that all the time. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good to know, because maybe I can have a different type of a way to end it that, you know, is not so cliche. Maybe, you know, you have 2 or 3 of your go-to moves, and just depending on the situation, you bring one out. But it was just a good thing for me to know that, like, I'm talking to somebody who does this for a living. So he just kind of chuckled at like my cliche way to get off to start to wrap it up, you know.
It's almost like the landscape of the interview. What I'm hearing from you is like you've gone back and forth through the whole interview process so many times now that you're starting to tweak your journey throughout it, and like how you start, how you end, how you transition. Like you're getting more specific in how you navigate all that.
Yes. And my endings are still a struggle for me. They're my biggest struggle, is ending the interview. So I'm just going to,
one way people get through that is, and I was doing this for some of my episodes, is as we get towards the end of this interview, I have a few questions that I always ask my guests. What are your favorite books? What are your favorite podcasts? Is there anyone that you want to amplify in your life right now? Like, and not that you use those questions, but that you could have some like boilerplate, this is information I collect from all my guests. And with the idea that it's kind of more actionable, like that's something, you know, stick around to the end for blank, right? An action step, stick around blank, and we're going to be sharing some really valuable resources or something. So you could work your way from knowing your end questions,